Hello? Can you guys hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. So pretty much was a beautiful day today. I think today was a little bit of a sigh of relief. We basically rallied this afternoon on the back end of what has been a bear market low for 2022, and the month starting off with a little bit of a rebound. That was basically the sentiment that we saw today, guys. Christina, good afternoon, by the way. So that was basically what I saw, kind of just pointing out. One of the biggest takeaways from this morning, just kind of walking you through my morning as I ended up seeing how the market was just, the landscape of everything. We saw on yesterday about Tesla. We saw the production numbers. We saw also their delivery numbers that were all relatively disappointing compared to what the estimates were also pretty much inclined to say. So that all fell short of the estimates basically. And then going into the opening bell, what I basically wanted to see off of that Tesla dump was that I wanted to see if the market was going to rally, in fact, what was going to be our relative strength and what was going to give us more so our lead to the upside. And as you see right now, pretty much it has been Microsoft and Apple. Microsoft and Apple basically negated whatever price action we saw out of Tesla, and that was basically the leading factor, and everything else just went right with it. So that was pretty much just a landscape of what I saw, looking at the relative strength as I usually end up doing, to pretty much give us a pinpoint of the direction to the upside or the downside from a hindsight perspective. All right. Christina mentioned what's going on. Diego, QQQ, I'll get to it just shortly. Annette, how are you? So, kind of give you the background of that. As I get into pretty much going into futures here right now, I'm going to take a peep at futures. And then, Diego, I'll get into the cues for you just shortly here. All right. But of course, bigger picture here, we basically still see what is basically to me a broader megaphone. We can continue to basically just expand this megaphone to the right as we have basically now give us a nice little upside price action here. We basically broke north of what was our Friday high, so that was a good sign. And as I was looking at pretty much earlier on in the morning, once we started to take lift off above 36.30 here on futures this morning, that gave me that sign we were going to start to see the breakout. We started to see the momentum build off of Apple, build off of Microsoft, as indicated that Tesla price action today. That was a little bit of my earlier sign on. I was pointing to specific levels. I was watching up towards breaking north of 36.65 to hit a target of 36.76. That was initially my first reaction of how the price action was moving and giving my targets. Above that 36.76 level, that was looking at towards the 200 EMA, as you see the blue line, and that was closing in on 37.14 as we made a convincing break. Just about around, I want to say around lunchtime or so, or just near after, we saw a little bit of a bigger explosion. So that's what pretty much my targets were going into tomorrow for the upside here. Now I'm gonna watch for a break over that 200 EMA tomorrow. Let's look for a break north of 37.14 over that 200 EMA, targeting 37.43. And then above that, I'm looking at a zone that I have particularly near to the resistance of this megaphone that's sitting between 37.81 to 38.05. And that's going to have to be more so determined at what point pinpoint area we stop within that zone is likely going to be depending upon the broader market strength. So a little bit early on to say exactly where in that zone we stop, but overall this entire, I want to say, leg up that we have, I am targeting 37.81 to 38.05 as particularly as my sell zone. So that's what I'm looking for. Otherwise, if we are going to end up breaking down here and we end up giving back all of today's gains, which we have seen, I think, as recent as last week, more so, I would expect that we reject this 200 EMA at 37.14, and then we're going to look for the downside right back down below 36.65 as we end up giving back all of today's gains. So that's basically giving you the north and south of that. Uh, in fact, giving back all of our gains today, I would basically be looking for that breakdown below 36.65, and then we're gonna potentially look to flirt with a new low of this bear market below that 3600 mark. So that's basically giving you the levels to basically break down confirmations, and then the downside or upside targets potentially. All right. So I'll get in quickly, Diego. Let's get into the cues as you mentioned. I'll pull up the cues here roughly on the hourly should be fine. You basically see today's price action. This is kind of a little bit of a cohesion of what I mentioned, looking at futures earlier on, in which my confirmation of breakout level was. But once we ended up reclaiming over that 20 EMA, sitting right around close enough, just under 272 half on the Qs, that's when we started to build momentum. Even building, as I mentioned, that we had that a little, I want to say a little intraday impulse to the upside. That was basically reclaiming that 20 EMA off of the hourly. And that's when I started to target up towards what was basically our 50 EMA here, targeting that 275 half mark. So as you see, we fell short. We were not able to basically reclaim over that 275 half. We saw the rejection. We see the pullback that's currently taking place. And so I want to see us test that 20 EMA here, currently sitting right around that 272.77. I would expect that we end up testing that as support, and we're going to make our way back towards retesting resistance at 275 half. That's going to be a big level going into tomorrow, so it's a little bit of a tight range that we sit in within the Qs, as I do see we're up about 50 cents or so after hours. A little bit of a rebound, possibly off of something maybe related to earnings, I would anticipate. But I want to see us get pretty much break north or south out of the zone. Either we break north to 275 half and we go for what looks like a full on gap fill, up towards close enough to 280 on the Qs. Otherwise, we end up breaking below that 20 EMA at 272.77, and I ultimately believe that we're flirting with potentially a new low. In which case, 269 is going to be the key support level to hold. Unless that breaks, then that's pretty much where I would lean to say that we potentially could make an inverted head and shoulders if we could potentially hold a 269. If we can't hold 269, that's literally confirmation of a new low here for Qs off of this bear market that we've been in. All right. So that's pretty much just kind of giving you a little bit of a black and white, but it is a tight range that we're sitting in right now between that 200, that 20 EMA and that 50. That's a very tight range that we're in that we've closed the day on. All right. Going through a few tickers here, I think we could probably point first towards Tesla. I think that's easily one to kind of pinpoint here. We basically ended up having a nice gap fill that we basically broke down. We filled the gap that was dating back towards July 21st. That ended up completing down towards that 247 mark. And that was basically the range that I was looking to retest as whatever given point, not necessarily today that it was. I was looking to basically retest that 247 mark at some given point, at whether it be today or later on in the week, to test as a resistance. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Avery actually called it out to short it at that 247 mark. That was the level that I was particularly watching to retest. So 247 is that level. I mean, it's my pretty much my gut feeling is that I don't even think we make it any higher than that level that we did today. I expect this to continue breaking down going into tomorrow. And in that same breath, then I would pretty much point out key levels here, looking at 239.59, 236.83, and then ultimately down towards 233 should be, I want to say, quote unquote, maybe a short term bounce, particularly for our next little demand zone. But that 233 cracks, that's going to potentially be very detrimental for the broader market. I believe, I don't think Apple and Microsoft are going to be able to save us from what we ended up having today. A day like Tesla being down about $22 today, and Microsoft and Apple holding it up today, I don't think that's necessarily going to be replicated for the rest of the week. So I do believe if we end up breaking below 233, that we're likely going to see a broader market sell-off with it, and that's going to take us right down into a range here. Uh, Roughly around 223 is what I'm targeting here to the downside. All right. If we end up breaking 233, that's about a quick $10 move to the downside that we're potentially looking at. All right. So that's another one that I'm going to keep an eye on. I believe Apple is another one. Obviously, I said at the top of the live here, I want to see if Apple is going to continue to show us any kind of relative strength as it did today. I want to see the continuation of this momentum here. So looking to see if we can break north roughly over 144 is the mark that I'm looking at. We break north of 144. I'm watching for 145.87. And then above that, that puts us close enough right into my downtrend resistance at that 150 mark. Otherwise, support that I'm watching, very critical support, is this roughly this 140.80 spot is what I'm watching for. If we can't hold 140.80, that's when I do believe that we take out the lows from last week, and that's going to be uh, likely included with a broader market sell-off with Tesla already continuing to show weakness. All right. So that's one I love. I believe last week, I don't know if it was Wednesday or Thursday, I was talking about the fact that I was actually looking at the semis. Today was actually a pretty good sign off of the semis here. I was particularly watching this from last week, looking for when the bounce was going to particularly take place. And that was one that I was looking at. You see we actually have a gap fill. And that's what I was looking at, the gap fill to be completed off of AMD. So this is one that I was particularly keyed in on. I was basically looking to reclaim over that 64 mark, and that was about a $2 move that we got to the upside here. And then we basically are sitting right below this 50 EMA that we basically fell a little shy of. But you do have a nice little gap fill sitting above that 67 mark. That's what I'm going to see if tomorrow if we can particularly get into that gap fill. So above 67.22, and that gap fill will complete at 68.30. So overall, PT is pretty much watching that 68, high 68 mark. We can put us into 69. Above that 69 level, I am watching for a bigger degree move up towards 72.80 for my overall PT on this one. All right, and that should, I mean, we'll have to see it once we get up towards that 72.80. If we end up seeing broader market strength, maybe I don't particularly say it's going to be tomorrow, but maybe later on in the week. But at some given point, I would likely anticipate that we're going to make some kind of push towards that 200 EMA, whether it ends up being a rejection or we end up reclaiming it or not. So that'll be something that's going to be later on. We'll probably talk about that at some given point later on in the week. But just pretty much resistance I'm watching for right now, the bigger target that I'm looking at for right now will be 72.80. All right. So those are pretty much just a spotlight of just a few names that I'm watching in different, I want to say different names as terms of rotation of leading indicators, Tesla, Apple, and then also watching the semis. Those are pretty much just names that I'm keeping eyes on. I could also point to Microsoft. That was a monstrous day that you had out of Microsoft as well. So again, I want to see, do we continue this push that we had into Microsoft? We broke a beautiful downtrend dating back to the 21st of last month, and right in towards that 100 EMA that we just basically fell short of. So I'm going to look for a larger degree move. I want to see a break north of 245 half. We get over 245 half. I'm targeting that 200 EMA at 250.59. And then it'll be left to be seen once we get to that 200 EMA at that 250 mark. Are we going to get a larger degree move in which the broader market is going to continue to show strength off of today? And then we can start to talk about the gap fill that's sitting. Basically, it takes us up towards 266 roughly. All right. So that's just basically pinpointing some key names that I'm watching, giving us those leading indicators of whether we're going to end up. If we go to the upside, obviously you're looking for the rotation and names to build momentum off of today. Otherwise, if we go south, then I think it's pretty much a given that we're likely going to end up either putting in a lower high and we'll see a midday reversal tomorrow. Otherwise, if we don't see those critical support levels hold, it's likely that we end up seeing a lower low for this particular bear market that we've been in for months already. All right. So I think that's pretty short and sweet off of today's price action. A lot of drastic movements to the upside. Let's see if they hold again tomorrow. Otherwise, this may be a replicate of what we seen last week, in which we had a monster rally, and then the following day we just had a monstrous bleed out. Okay, giving back all the gains. So other than that, though, I will pretty much leave it there short and sweet. Appreciate you guys always joining as always. But you guys all have a great